I really want to know, Sharon.
Bop, 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 bop. I'm just sitting here bopping to it.
No, I need to add the song just for background. We can have it sometimes. I could turn it up as we're in here. We could have little, music interludes in the middle of our sessions. Yeah.
Well, good morning and welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files. This series is for anyone who manages projects for a living. If you've been a project manager, program manager, product manager, group manager, operations manager, or maybe even owned your own business and worn all the different hats, this weekly series is definitely for you. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, the founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of the series where Sharon and I explore project management topics from the perspective of what not to do as you manage projects. So in each episode of the Project Failure Files, we'll talk about the common pitfalls, usually from that perspective of, because Sharon and I have fallen into those pits.
With so many hats.
Yes. We'll share some of our personal stories and experiences and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
So in this episode, we are talking about the power of transparency and how openness in decision-making, planning, and progress reporting can build trust, enhance team morale, and contribute to overall project success.
We talk about transparency in every other episode. I mean, it's a popular topic, and it's part of like my personal philosophy with project management. One of my Buckley-isms, and I didn't start calling that actually a team that I was managing. They started referring to like those phrases that Buckley's just repeats. This is one of them. And I would say all the time, the more that people are involved in the process, the more likely they will support that process. And that's why transparency is so key. When you involve people, they then start doing crazy things like, I don't know, sharing ideas of how we could do more or do better, things like that. So it's an important topic for sure. And as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we may have missed.
So let's get started. And we can read off a dictionary definition of transparency. I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff that comes up, but I think it makes more sense if we start with some personal stories of transparency in action.
I completely agree. And do you have anything that comes to mind right at the top of mind?
I've had so many experiences with this specific topic over the years and so many different ways that it has come about. I definitely think the first one that comes to mind is, when I was really very young and new in software development, I had a very specific project manager that I worked with. And basically what they would do is they would show up once a week in the project status meeting. They would read off a bunch of stuff and then they would go hide the rest of the time. And I'm going to be really honest, like most of the time, the development team was like, what is it that we're doing? And so I think we struggled a lot. And what's really funny is that we kind of self-formed a little bit of a team because our project manager was like kind of a little bit MIA. And so we created this kind of like self-formed team to decide what we were going to do and what tasks we were going to do. And we just kind of hoped that we were doing the right thing. And then we dealt with it, every week when we had that status update, we kind of got told if we were doing the right thing or not. But I think, I always think about that now as I'm, working with teams and advising people about transparency is just, I never had any clue what was going on throughout the course of that particular project.
Yeah. It's one of those things too, where having transparency sometimes really helps with trust. Like I've been dropped in as a consultant or as a new manager into an organization where I've had several times in my career where I have absorbed other peer teams. And so even one of my peers, a couple times I've had where my peers became one of my directs and they still manage their team. And one of the things I've tried to get them to do is like open up about what's working, what you're working on, what's working and not working with the tasks that you have. Like, let's have these conversations. And it would take multiple weeks of one-on-ones to soften people up, to share more, to get them to open up and to be more vocal because they saw it so many people see that sharing of information as this competitive thing. It's like, oh, I'm giving away my special sauce, and this is what like
Mhm.
this is my space and what I can go and control. And we've so much, we need to do away with that type of thinking. One of the things that came to mind around this topic was this shift over the last 15 years towards more social collaboration really changed the way that a lot of teams collaborated and worked together. And there was this thing called, this movement called working out loud.
Mhm.
And this idea that power does not come from hoarding of information. That's the old way of thinking. I mean, when I did my first consulting side project while doing my full-time job, I mean, I had my methodology and all of my templates, everything were literally in 3-ring binders. It was something I would physically bring with me to these projects and go through and show them. And I was afraid of creating and sharing digital versions of things. This is like the late 90s, folks. And then giving that away, because that was, well, hey, you're not paying me yet. Like, I will give you these things,
Where's
I'll
your
show you them in
IP?
person, and really now it's just like, here's my methodology. Like my value add is me and my time, my experience to go and get these things organized. Like anybody could go, you go to Chat GPT and say, hey, give me a version of this document, what's included in this, or there's dozens of templates, maybe a handful of them decent, out on the interweb that you just go and pull down. Um, and so you don't have that kind of power. So there's more power in sharing than in hoarding.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, I'm constantly reminding people, knowledge hoarding is one of your biggest risks because, I mean, part of the value of having a team, a value of having, people around you is their experiences, their knowledge, their abilities. And I think you're absolutely right. For many years, I think people felt like their secret sauce, their IP, their knowledge was their value. And so they would sit on it, kind of like a dragon sits on their little hoard of gold. As I have all of this stuff that I don't want to share with anybody. But what we're really coming to learn is, I can share all of that stuff, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's only half of it. Having me be there is the other piece, that provides my personal value. And so I think, there's a lot of value in being transparent as a team and being transparent as a leader and allowing people to feel safe in communicating openly and sharing that knowledge and experience with each other.
Yeah, the old way of having what's the right phrasing for this, but like the hero employees that are out there, like to go and push these things. Look, it's great to have employees that are just awesome and can carry things, like go out there and do accomplish so much. And sometimes you just need to get out of their way, let them go do their thing around those tasks. But I mean, what's more important is, what is the goal of the company is to complete this project. And you want to recognize people that are standouts for doing their job. Of course, you're not don't want to take that away, but you need to do it as a, because the actual result is all of us crossing the finish line together with this project, that we deliver it. It's on schedule, within budget, and we're able to do that and manage all the other projects and initiatives that we have to do at the same time. So by being more open and transparent with, here's what the project is, here's where it is, here's our prioritization, here's where we're having successes, here's where we're struggling, and we need people to step up. It will give people the chance to rise up and show that they can do more, that they're capable of more, that they can, extend themselves beyond what you've defined.
No, and actually that was one of the things I was thinking too is, you're creating opportunities because I don't I'm gonna call this out. I love Ted Lasso. I love watching Ted Lasso. And so it teaches you a lot about team sports, right? It's the idea of, yes, there are people who may be stars in their field, or maybe, the one that everybody goes to kind of get that final thing across the line. But you have to remember that they're all in it together, and you can't win without the whole team. And so I think sometimes stepping aside and letting people have that opportunity allows them to then have that opportunity to learn, that opportunity to grow, that opportunity to build a skill set that maybe they don't have, which then allows the whole team to be better, so that the whole team can, go up and actually take on more challenging problems, or be more successful, or do a better job in general.
I think there's a lot of benefits to transparency with the team for sure. But also think like externally with your, outside of your team, your stakeholders within your company or your partners or your clients. And we're not talking about giving full transparency to how the glue is made in the factory, kind of like all the different pieces with people that are external to the company. But it does build trust the more open you are with things. Like I love it as a, and this too, we've had these conversations, but as a Microsoft MVP, I love when, the fact of being an MVP, sometimes we become privy to information that's roadmap that's not out there and available yet. Sometimes we hear about things months or even a year or more in advance of what they're working on. Like we get to see some of the thinking behind like the next motion of this product or wave of products, and can provide feedback into that. Other times we're hearing about it where they're polishing, getting ready for go to market, and we may only hear about it a week or two before the big announcements that the rest of the world hears. But at each of those that gives us a chance to provide feedback, it then builds more trust in what's being released. If when people, again, I'll go back to my Buckleyism, the more that you involve people in that process, the more that they own that process. They own the result of that process. And if you involve people, I always love this way is that think about it this way, somebody comes and provides you a feedback, a customer comes to you and says, Sharon, we had these issues, like we've been using this, but these things aren't working. But we have these other suggestions that could improve the product. And you're like, okay, well, thanks. And so they provided that feedback. If then you never speak of it again, how's that customer feeling?
Yeah, they know the product better than I do, and they probably use it more than I do. And so they're probably feeling like I'm not hearing them, and I'm not listening, and I'm not taking their feedback seriously.
So if you follow up that the next time you meet with that client, you outline, here are the 4 things that you brought up in the last call. One of them, we actually already do it. The feature's a bit buried. Here's how you go and do it. The second one is something that we reviewed and it just doesn't make sense for this product. It's an interesting idea, but it's outside of that. And the other 2, like they're in the roadmap, and we're like, we don't have a date on either one yet, but here's where they fit in. How is the customer's response with that?
I mean, from a squishy for a squishy perspective, they know I care about them. If nothing else, they know that I took the time to look. But also, I think they feel educated and informed. And so I think from that transparency perspective, it's the idea of I'm not hiding things from them and not giving them that input. I'm sharing the information that I do know to help them feel like they know where they're headed, they know what they're doing, they know more educated on what their options are.
Yeah. We had so another experience that I had, and I'm sure you've never experienced this, but where we realized that something was not going well. We had a delivery date, but the test results coming back, like the performance was not there on this. And so going back, we knew we were going to be, yelled at by the CEO, that, a bunch of the other stakeholders are going to be furious about this. But we're like, as soon as we identified, like we shared all the test results, we didn't hide any of that. It allowed us to have the difficult conversations up front so that we could then focus on, here's what we can do to mitigate this. I've actually received criticism of my project management style in the past, that I didn't take enough time to self-loathe about a missed date or a missing requirement or something or other, that I focus too much on, okay, now we understand that. Here's how we go build upon moving forward. It's like, well, wait a second. Why did this get screwed up? I'm like, does that change the fact that this got messed up, that somebody slipped up, that this didn't happen? We didn't catch this early enough? No, here's the plan forward. Like, why are we spending? We're going to cover this in the postmortem. We
Mm-hmm.
know that a mistake was made or a
Yep.
slip or something wasn't caught. Why are you spending so much time beating up on people? Even worse, if you went and then somebody screwed something up, and it happened in this case, they were not fired. But I'll tell you what, that project manager never made that mistake again. Like, he was like overboard on ensuring that these things were answered and identified up front. And he was given the leeway to make mistakes. And then again, but that all of that happened because we had a transparent, open process. It was a change in culture for that organization to constantly talk about, where are we? What's the progress? What do we see as potential risks? And it was great to be able to say, we thought it was a potential risk. We got through it. That didn't happen. We didn't have to mitigate, but we already had the plan for that. It's like doing it's constantly doing a SWOT analysis. Okay, baseline, SWOT analysis. A week later, new baseline, SWOT analysis of this. What do we think potential threats to this? Where are the opportunities to do more? But the more that you can, in your methodology, make that part of that process to make that as visible and transparent as possible, the more that people will be able to, it'll build trust. It'll build overall morale with the team and make people more accountable for especially if you give room for people to make mistakes. They're going to be more accountable for their mistakes and own their tasks.
The other thing that happens when you do that is the more open you are so that everybody kind of knows what's going on and we're all on the same page. If there needs to be a pivot, if there's something where something happens unexpectedly, you need to make a shift, you need to make a change. If you can explain yourself for the most part, but this one thing happens where you don't have time to explain, or you don't have the bandwidth to be able to give them all the information, I think that trust is so important, because they're like, you know what? We know what's going on up to this point. We trust you. If you need to make a change, we'll be behind you. And I think that is huge sometimes when you have, especially like large projects where you've got a whole team that's behind you, backing you up. That ability to say, just trust me, we're going the right direction, is one thing when they have no idea what's going on. It's another thing when you've been transparent throughout the project, they know where they're at, and you're asking them to trust you through one small change. I think you get a lot more, trust from that team when you're doing it that way.
Yeah, it's I always used to call it, like the trust in the process. And again, it's like let the process work. And so again, it goes back to that example, that customer that brought a bunch of things forward. I mean, I was always a fan of the idea of, here it's out visible that you have the method of collecting all the input. It's like, here's all the requests over the last week, and then talk about each one of them and move it in real time. Like I call it like parking lot, the things that we know that are good things to do, that would need to be done. We don't know where it fits. It's not urgent for right now, but we want to do. Like, we don't lose those things, because it might be that we conclude this project and it's in version 2 of the product. It's the next wave. Yeah, we need to do it, but for this launch, for this reason, it doesn't need to be there. But when people see the process and they trust the process, then you can go to them and say, hey, look, it's a great point. It's a parking lot item. For this, not relevant. Here's why. You can argue, but people don't have to agree with your reasoning, your logic around that. But if they know that you were thoughtful about that you considered it, that you you applied the process, the methodology to that, they know that it's not just going into a vacuum. It's not going, it's the old joke of the suggestion box, which just feeds into a shredder or goes right into a garbage, that they're actually being thought about. And then just a small percentage go into the shredder or the garbage. That some clearly need to be in the shredder of the garbage, but yeah.
Well, we can't do everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think culturally too. I mean, for an organization that is more open and transparent, it allows you to be much more creative around change. It allows you to react to changes much more quickly. And as I always say, that's like, look, the organization that is, if change management is a strength of that culture, they will
Hmm.
have a distinct competitive advantage
Hmm.
over other companies.
Yeah, I think when things come up, maybe that aren't expected, or when things come up where there's an opportunity, and I'm a big fan of saying that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that if everybody kind of knows what's going on and an opportunity comes up, and everybody's prepared, then sometimes you can get really lucky and you can do things within projects that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise had you not all kind of been on the same page.
Yeah. And what would you say your practical tips are, your best practices for maintaining transparency? You think about that with your own team, with your own organization. What are the things like the must have in the way that you are managing those activities?
And I'm going to be really honest, this has been something that as I've grown and as I've learned, I've really been trying to come up with better and better ways to do some of these things because I really do want to be more transparent. And so I'm just going to say to people out there, sometimes it's a struggle. Sometimes it's a challenge to figure out how can I do this the best way. And I would definitely say sharing things out on a regular basis is a really good idea. And I'm a routine person. If if you ever get to know me, like I like routine. So I like having some sort of regular updates, some sort of regular meetings where you're consistent about who you're talking to, what you're talking about, and what information you're sharing, so that people, when they do come to that, they know what to expect and they know, what they're going to get out of that.
Yeah. It's again, that should be part of that. I love the idea of having a standing time where we're reviewing, and here's the format of that. And it's not that things can't change, but that you say, like, here's the way that we're tracking tasks. Here's how we're tracking the overall project. As I always say, the project of what is the system of record for the collection of the information. Like now, I mean, we use things in teams. We use Planner and use the Kanban model in Planner with the planner boards, so you can drag and drop and move things through that life cycle. But having all of those places so that, and it might be with some organizations, and I've done this in the past, where I used to on a weekly basis send an email to all stakeholders for each project. And so if you were involved with 5 projects, you're getting emails from potentially 5 project managers of the 5 different projects that you're a stakeholder within. And then the structure of those is consistent. Very early SharePoint customer that we're helping build out. This is before we had all of the templating capability. So they were going back to SharePoint 2003 for folks that are in that community and remembers how clunky that product was. But like going back to that in 2007, the WSS days, it was a pharmaceutical company that was building products like creams and makeups and like all that kind of stuff, and the healthcare products, but mostly skin related. And they had hundreds of products, but every single product site was structured the same way. There was a folder for meeting minutes. There was a library with all of the ingredients and the contacts and the source information and manufacturers. There was the product owners. I mean, they had everything. So you could go to any one of their 200 products and you'd find the exact same structure so that you would know where to go look for that information. Like that's an extreme example of that. But if you can be so organized around your communication, the weekly emails of that with the weekly status calls, that's where there's the opportunity to bring something up. Here's our change control process, a project change request, PCR for something that's fixed and live. That you have feedback mechanisms for collecting information anonymously as well as planned and scheduled, but then also like when we were in the office setting, I'm managed by walking around having conversations with people. Still had one-on-ones, still had meetings, but the rest of it was to go engage. Like, you can clearly see when somebody is stressed out about something, or somebody that is underutilized. That's my nice way. From
For
walking
things
around.
to do.
Right. But then have those conversations about, what's going on and what could be done. And it helps you to have those other conversations, like as a manager of, like, hey, how's this fitting in with like your career track of what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish. And you're able to have better conversations around those kinds of personal discussions if you are open and conversational around the project related activities.
And I'll tell you what, man, over the last 4 or 5 years, there is no lack of available tool sets out there to be able to communicate individually, as a group, as a team, as a project. And we're almost getting to the we have so many options, issue, but there's no lack of really good tools out there that can help you be more communicative with your team and your team members.
Yeah, that goes with the two. I mean, it's part of your methodology for you as an organization to decide, what are the metrics and dashboards, like can we standardize around these things? And you might have different business units that have different tools that they prefer. And it really is up to, like, at having run shared services teams, I look to my executive sponsor as being the final voice on what that person, my VP, my CEO, wants to see in that output, and everybody else's requirements will need to fit within that scope. Because what you don't want to do, and you shouldn't do this, is you've got 10 stakeholders, and 10 stakeholders want 10 different versions of reporting and status and all these different things. Like, no, no, because then those, I've been in bad project management jobs where all I was doing was chasing people for updates and filling out forms and status reports and things around that, and not allowing me to actually go and project manage and be strategic about.
I'll tell you what, talk about failure files. I can tell so many different stories of exactly that, where we've got different stakeholders, different executive, different leaders that all need to see similar information in different ways in different places. And you're absolutely right. As a project manager, you'll spend half of your life catering to those different people. And what will end up happening is you're unable to manage the project effectively because you're spending so much time, communicating. And that's not to say it's not important, because it's absolutely important. But I think when we talk about tips and tricks is, agree on a way that information will be transparent in a way that the group all finds valuable, so that you can be efficient in the way that you update that information, but also be very transparent so that the people who need to see it can see what they need to see in the place that they need to see it.
Potentially another topic, another episode is around that idea of, because it's all right. We're talking a lot about management and cultural issues, really. And it's okay that we fill in some of the kind of the standardized. We know this will be a technical discussion to also have. And I think that there are definitely mistakes, like trying to juggle all different versions of status reports when you really should try to consolidate. I mean, that's a worthwhile topic. So you might see that as an episode, folks. Yeah.
Speaking of, make sure you document all of your risks and issues somewhere so that everybody knows what the potential roadblocks or real roadblocks are.
That's why I go back to, I love the format of the 4-blocker. And if you go, folks, I don't have to share like what I'm using. If you go and look, I learned about the 4-blocker model while in business school in the late 90s. I'm working on my MBA. And so there's just a model for sharing information, but it's, as I described earlier, just 4 quadrants, super simple. And one of the key components is exactly what Sharon, you just said, is the risks and issues. and what you would, or what needs to be done to mitigate those things. So if they've happened already, what you do to mitigate, or what you can do to plan around so that maybe that risk doesn't happen. And then quadrant next to it is the next steps, actions. That's where, like, here's what we're going to do because of these risks as well. But yeah, have that conversation. And then, I mean, the best plan where you've identified potential risks is you've sufficiently prepared for those. If they happen, it's minimized, or that they don't happen because you were able to identify and avoid.
And if you have never done a stand-up, and I still laugh to think that there are people out here who have never done a stand-up or don't value stand-ups. I think everybody kind of does their own thing. But if you've never done a stand-up and you don't understand the value in a stand-up, I really, really encourage you to try, whether it's a daily stand-up or a weekly stand-up, or, you know, just a regular occurring stand-up, just taking sometimes that 10 or 15 minutes to regroup with your team and say, hey, does anybody have any issues? Is there anything that is going to keep us from achieving our goal? Can have tremendous value overall on a project. So I encourage you to try it if you haven't.
I have done that numerous times, because what also will happen is people get so focused in on their own tasks, they sometimes lose sight of the larger project, what's going on. And so I would not as a permanent thing, but I would institute like a daily stand up, which sometimes might be, 5-10 minutes to go through to make sure that we're all on the same page on this. This is the end goal, folks. Like, you're so into your silo. It's so easy to do, especially now. Look, I work 100% from home, and we're all remote, or we're hybrid. There's I don't know what the numbers are, but percentage wise, especially in information worker realm where a lot of PMs live, is that, we're a smaller percentage is in office than hybrid or fully remote. And so it's easy to get into your own world and lose sight of the bigger picture. So having that call where it's at the start of every day, where we're like, same page, here's what was just completed yesterday, here's next, the deadline is in 2 weeks, is what's working towards. All right. And so with that deadline in mind, and then release them from the burden of the daily must be here, which is horrible in multiple timelines, or like, I get it, but the value of doing that, even people that, again, direct experience, my direct employees that hated when I'd institute that. But even then, like a couple days later, they come back and they're like, yeah, man, this is the right thing. Like, it's right. We're back on track. Like, it works.
It's so fast. It's
Yeah.
so fast. It has so much value. Projects always just like really come right back into alignment after doing it for a very short amount of time. So yeah, highly recommend that.
Well, I mean, I think here too, the value of transparency, to kind of wrap up. I mean, it's all about building trust. It's about enhancing team morale, improving your ability to make decisions because if you see it beforehand and make a decision, then you're able to go in and act versus react. And when you react, you're not going to, that's an action you're taking without full visibility or understanding of the potential impacts of that decision. Not the way to make a decision. And it can impact, I mean, transparency, the overall success of the projects. And my, again, number one thing that I advocate through is that make that a cultural strength. Maybe you have to do a lot of work to make that cultural change, but make it something that your organization is good at, and it will solve a lot of problems. I mean, shedding light is a great antiseptic for a lot of bad behavior out there. It makes people accountable. It builds trust. It's the right way to work in the modern workplace.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, to that point, it's if you are always open and honest and transparent about what's going on, then there's really no shadows for people to lurk in, and there's no hiding for people to do, and there's no elephants to be covered, because at the end of the day, we all kind of know what's going on. And so I 100% believe that transparency equals being proactive. I agree with you, Christian. I think it keeps you from having to be reactive because you kind of already know.
Yep. And if you liked this topic, well, here's how you can reach out to Sharon and I via X. And I mean, you can search for us. We're all over the place. But it's also, I mean, if you follow the rest of our series, and here's where you can find the rest of the episodes out on YouTube. We are here every Monday, always at 9 a.m. Pacific, so noon Eastern. Come and participate in one of our live shows, or reach out to us offline. And then, of course, we also have this community. Yeah, we currently have, I think this is, what is this, episode 22? My notes here, scrolling.
Yeah,
Yes, 22. Yeah. Anyway, I think we have, like, with the 2 we've added in the last week or so, I think we're at 42 planned episodes as of today. So we're going to go well into the new year, but we are rain or shine every Monday. So we'd love to have you come and watch. Please subscribe and share your feedback, because we like being transparent. We like to hear as well from folks.
Yeah. Thanks for watching us.
Yep. And we'll see you next Monday with our next episode. So see you, Sharon.
Bye.